I think first and foremost, from you setter's perspective and in our experiences, a tool that I think is, or we feel is underutilized as it pertains to economic development, and of course in this case inclusive economic development, is the tool of asset mapping. And so currently we are working on a project in the Virgin Islands in collaboration with the University of Virgin Islands to conduct an asset map of the islands themselves. And this is a funded effort that comes out of U.S. Commerce Economic Development Administration. And when we think about, again, asset mapping and its importance, I think oftentimes we lose efficiencies within our value chain because we're not clearly informed as to the systems that are in place, the resources that are in place, be it workforce development, be it specific assets that are necessary for any strategic planning that happens. And so oftentimes, well, in this case, I'm not going to say oftentimes, in this case, we are looking at the asset map from a broader perspective. So this cuts across, agricultural lines, industry lines, I should say. And so from that perspective, it's an opportunity for the Virgin Islands or any country in that fashion to get a high-level view of those assets and resources, and from that high-level view, be able to determine what gaps that may potentially exist, and how those gaps align to any strategic planning that may happen, or they may want to happen as it pertains to the value chain that they're focusing on. For instance, I'll give you a perfect example. We have another project that we're working on called the Analytical Support Services for the Evaluation of Sustainable Systems, another long title, but another great acronym, which is ASSESS. That is in partnership with the University of Rhode Island, and it is addressing 22 of our Western African countries in the areas of agriculture, trade, energy, and environment. And as many of you have worked in the field, you know that one of the chief approaches to endeavors such as this is the implementation of a theory of change. And if you guys would indulge me for a second, we can see how asset mapping is very important, because the first thing we know from the steps within the theory of change is identifying the long-term problem, right, that we're trying to solve, or the long-term goal. And then the second step, of course, is conducting some backwards mapping, right? So we got to conduct some backwards mapping in order to identify those preconditions that are necessary to reach those goals. Right? And so if we think about that, what are those preconditions? How do we get to those preconditions? And then third, which is kind of what ties us to the budget and which of course, creates a whole other discussion around the strategic plan, is how do we then kind of identify those interventions that we're going to use to create those preconditions, and what is the cost of those interventions, right? And if we're thinking about it from the perspective at this table, is the overall comprehensive economic development strategy in our area, is it aligned to our current assets? Is it aligned to the interventions that we need within the current value chains in agriculture, right? Is that in place? Before we can even kind of think about our siloed, a lot of times what we have found, our siloed identification of problems and goals that are not always aligned with, one, again, the assets that are available, or two, the strategic plan that has been set forth through the region. And so again, that's why we have been big advocates of the usage of asset map on a broader scale, understanding that asset mapping is going to come in some way, shape, or form, regardless of what project that you are endeavoring to undertake. And so then the question is, how do we best kind of employ those interventions, right, once we are able to identify the assets and resources. And I think the other great thing that asset mapping does, when we think about it from an innovative perspective, typically the knowledge base of these assets are within a few individuals, right? And so with an asset map that is publicly communicated, now that information is to the broad population, and that broad population has talents, experience, and ideas and innovations that can potentially be employed with now the new knowledge of the current assets, linkages, and systems that are currently in place. And so from that perspective, we have made some great strides there. We have both in Virgin Islands and in Western Africa as well. I think to that point, in terms of understanding the capabilities of asset mapping, is how it identifies, as we just heard, the need for the filling of potential gaps that we identified. So the workforce development. So for instance, we're engaged with multiple countries, Jamaica, Trinidad, in professional development efforts, professional training workshops we've conducted, currently conducting critical thinking training as such in Trinidad, Jamaica, and the list kind of goes on from there. So from that perspective, again, it's really, it all is falling back on our understanding and our knowledge of our systems and our resources. And without that full understanding, I think we're never going to get our optimal impact or our optimal yield of many of our projects that have great potential. I think another thing I would like to add in terms of some of our work we're doing currently with our students at Delaware State University, again, is the development of Economic Development and Leadership Institute. Upon the creation of SEDIT, we found that our students, for whatever reason, have not been engaged in the area of economic development and have not been provided the skill sets to really understand the different moving parts that it takes to kind of move an economy, move a community forward. Oftentimes, as many of you know, we have these two trains. We have an economic development train and we have this community development train, and often without effective synergy, without effective idea design, and oftentimes these two don't work in unison and harmony as they should in order for us to achieve our ultimate goals. And so that type of knowledge that's needed, that type of knowledge, I should say, needs to be passed on to our youth. And that's what we're doing through our Economic Development Institute. And those students actually, once again, they work closely with us on all of our various projects, both domestic and abroad. And from that perspective, again, understanding a workforce need of the future, that's the kind of the area that the Economic Development and Leadership Institute is looking to fill. And so I will leave you with that, and as we kind of engage in the formal discussion, we can talk more about how asset mapping and the different projects that we undertake can support the efforts.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. I'm going to change the dynamic somewhat because I'm going to ask now a representative from the region and ask Dr. Clark, Executive Director of Hardy, to make a presentation and so that we can see how we can practice that. And then we're going to talk, we're going to ask Ambassador Ineos from the Bahamas to get his perspective. And then, you know, to enrich the focused discussion.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I put together a few slides to give you a Caribbean context. Unfortunately, it doesn't represent all of the Caribbean. It principally represents the CARICOM, which is really the English-speaking Caribbean plus Suriname and Haiti. It doesn't include Cuba and Dominican Republic, or the US there in case it's more likely. The regional context, you must know that there is a CARICOM strategic plan for the development of the Caribbean, in which agriculture is framed as one of the instruments for economic enfranchisement. And that is supported by a regional food and nutrition security policy and action plan, a community agriculture policy that has 4 pillars. One dealing with sustainable development, one dealing with youth and gender issues, one dealing with value chains, as well as other and various initiatives. So there is regional policy context set for development. This is some aspects and so on of the Caribbean Food Import Bill and the Caribbean in context. In order to build the issues and so on of competitiveness, there are issues that we have to address. Niche products, the gastronomic elements, pursuing cross-border investments, some of which have started already, and the like. And of course, this has to take place within the context of the value chains that we want to address. And looking at the value chains, we first said that everything is going to wear a climate change hat. Whether we're looking at soil sequestration, or we're looking at we're looking at plant genetic resources. And we also said that given the small size of the Caribbean, that everything has to be based upon partnerships. Let's just go to the other presentation as well. We're speaking about advancing.
Can I ask you a quick question before you continue?
Yeah.
When you see the small size of the Caribbean, when we calculate these measures, are we measuring the 200-mile radius outside the island boundaries?
Yes, in fact.
You are?
In fact, one of the instruments, one of the clusters that has been established is the Caribbean Food and Nutrition Security Cluster. And in that cluster, you have fisheries represented, the Caribbean Fisheries Management Agency that looks at the management of the fishery resources throughout the Caribbean, and actually includes all of the states that touch upon the Caribbean Sea: Venezuela, Colombia, Costa Rica, Bahamas, and the like. And have some specific areas of action with respect to certain targeted species like queen conch in Bahamas and flying fish and so on from Barbados Ridge of Florida. Okay? Now, that cluster meets every month. The cluster has in it the Caribbean Examination Council, the Caribbean Disaster Management Agency, the Caribbean Public Health Agency. It has the CARICOM Secretariat. It includes the Food and Agricultural Organization, the Inter-American Institute for Cooperative Agriculture. So it's a mix of international and regional agencies that meet with respect to looking at the Caribbean food and agriculture agenda and trying to implement that charge that we've been given under the Caribbean Strategic Plan for Economic Development. So it is chaired by CARDI, and CARDI presents itself as an interlocutor for you to look at the possibilities of collaborating with the Caribbean. Now, it has a people focus because we have been able to get into the heads of, because one of the things about the Caribbean is that you have the highest decision-making body is the Conference of the Heads of Governments. And there's a quasi-cabinet arrangement for the Conference of Heads of Governments where the President of Ghana has lead responsibility for agriculture. We are now positioned where he is going to have discussions at the next heads of governments meeting in February in Ghana on agriculture and the way forward. Having gotten there, we have realized that we can't speak in terms of a new plant variety or new technology or about climate change. We have to speak to them about jobs, about saving foreign exchange, addressing issues of balance of payments, and how can agriculture help them to be able to do that. So we are positioning ourselves to be able to speak that kind of language, and we've been trying to get some collaboration to allow us to speak that language to them. In other words, what is the impact that agriculture can create with respect to these particular issues? One of the big challenges that they face is the issues of chronic non-communicable diseases. They have been able to lead in this particular respect at the United Nations General Assembly. And they now need agriculture to step up to the plate to say, how can we assist in addressing the problem of chronic non-communicable diseases? We argue very strongly that partnerships is the key to moving forward, given our limited resources. With research organizations, with the public sector, with the private sector, with the farmers. We have been able to have some measure of investment, large-scale investment in the agricultural sector. For example, Kiffin Simpson, who is regarded as the Warren Buffett of the Caribbean, has invested in 30,000 acres in Ghana to produce rice and other stuff. The idea being, how can we engender more inputs from the private sector, given the large quantity of funds that are sitting in the bank to help agricultural development. Part of the strategy going forward is how to engage and retain youth in the sector. How do we get on the ICT bandwagon to do as District of Columbia University is doing in order to be able to promote and advance the cause of agriculture. So if I thought that this week I would have been signing an MOU with the District of Columbia, having heard a presentation last year and having engaged her. How do we support the enabling services, the policy research as necessary, the marketing research as necessary? How do we deal with the issues of trade facilitation? Because we can't deal with the value chain as an abstract construct. We have to look at all of the issues within the Caribbean which impact upon it. Transportation. How do we deal with getting the produce from Guyana into the Bahamas and vice versa? So these are how some of the issues that we have to address. How do we often the thin underbelly is financing. Creating financing models that supports agricultural development. What are the lessons that have been learned elsewhere that we can apply within the Caribbean context? We've forged a relationship with the Agricultural Development Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, who have seen the wisdom not only of lending for investments in Trinidad, but are lending for investments in Guyana. And more, we need those kind of things to happen. And that can't take place except there's an accountability framework. That we have to demonstrate to those who provide resources to us value for money, the impact of what has happened. Measuring in terms of employment, poverty alleviation, nutrition, balance of payments, increasing of foreign exchange. So our doors are open. I'm saying, based upon the models that we have examined, innovation models in Africa, etc., that send me your faculty, send me your students. McGill University is doing it already. A lot of the marine science work that has been done for Barbados has been done by McGill University through the Bel-Air Institute, which has been there since 1960. And there are opportunities for you to do the same thing with respect to the rest of the Caribbean. Thank you very much.
We'll ask Ambassador Enius for the Bahamas. So,
thank you, Dr. Spencer. I think this is the first time the Bahamas has had the opportunity to present at this forum. And it's a particularly opportune time because we are in the midst of transforming our agricultural sector. And one of the challenges I find is that we in the Bahamas have been late in integrating into CARICOM. And we are perceived to be a tourism country. However, because of the challenges which tourism has brought to our country, we have to take certain steps. This particular government that is in power now, the Christie government, has taken certain initiatives for which I have responsibility, and now I would like to share some of those ideas that we have. I would like to give you some background information as to where we were prior to 2012 and where we are now. This is the Bahamas. We don't show you Florida, but we started Florida and we almost on the way down to Cuba. Actually, ladies and gentlemen, the Bahamas is the largest country in CARICOM. We extend over 100,000 square miles. And there's an island of Andros. Andros is the 5th largest island in the Caribbean Sea. We are in the same position as most CARICOM countries. We are a food deficit country. In 1992, we had to change the government, and the government changed the direction and they introduced a duty reduction policy, which literally wiped out the agricultural sector, and the sector went into a state of collapse. As you would see that in 1978, when we had our FAO Census of Agriculture, there was some 89,000 acres, almost 90,000 acres in production. By 2012, that acreage had declined by almost 70,000. And some of the major casualties of that ill-designed policy is that our poultry industry was decimated, so as well as food processing, and our ports, small farmer sector is facing the problem of an aging farming group. So in order to address the sectorial environment, I first would like to point out that the Stafford Sands model, which was developed in the Bahamas, transformed the region as the Bahamas began the transformation from agriculture to services. This had happened shortly after the war. We are not a member of WTO, nor are we signatories to the Treaty of Shagarama, so we don't participate in the single market economy. But now we have come to the realization that we have to integrate ourselves. And just recently, Mr. Barton Clark was in the Bahamas, and we're now members of CADI, and we're looking forward to that relationship because CADI will bring that research aspect to our agricultural sector. One of the reasons for the decline in our food production output is what I call the block doctrine. One of the factors for the increase in our food bill is the fact that we have 7 million tourists annually. Tourism exacerbates food imports. This block doctrine introduces the idea of cheap food. And some of our politicians had to do that. It was cheaper to import than to grow your own. And it stemmed from the fact that in 1986, at the GATT conference in Uruguay, John Block, then the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, made this statement. The statement is that the idea that developing countries should feed themselves is an anachronism from a bygone era. We would better ensure their food security by by relying on U.S. agricultural products, which are available in those countries. That was a real policy, and that is part of the reason for destroying the rice industry in Cuba, and then in Haiti, and former President Clinton acknowledged that fact, and it has pervaded the thinking throughout the region. We in the Bahamas have adopted an import substitution policy, like I've been telling you, Mr. Strong, right? Because as Mr. Clark said, it would save us foreign exchange. And it would offer us the opportunity to expand production and increase our competitiveness. We have already seen the results of that. We have a weekly advertisement in the paper where we show our prices, and we have the BAMSI prices or the Institute prices, along with the USDA prices and the American Marketing Association prices, and in every category of food that we produce, we are competitive and we are beating the imports. We are going to exploit our comparative advantage because we have certain comparative advantages. We're the most northerly Caribbean island archipelago, and as far as I know, and Barton, maybe you can verify this, I think nobody grows bananas at the latitude which we grow. Is that right? No, they don't grow commercially in Florida. They grow as an ornamental. We grow them commercially in Abaco. And we know that over the years we have the export potential to hit the eastern seaboard market of the U.S. and we're in the process of doing that at the moment. In 2012, we developed a 20-year plan, building based on agriculture. And the centerpiece of that plan was the Bahamas Agriculture and Marine Sciences. It's a program, this institute is comprised of 4 components: training. And we have nullified that view, which was shared here, that youth are not attracted to agriculture. We have graduated in 2 years our first associate degree class, and they've come from all over the Bahamas. I said we have the research component where we're working with Kadi. On our marine, we have a marine farm. I think we're the only one in the region with such a farm, where aquaponics and hydroponics are critical aspects of our marine farm. And Dr. O'Hara, we are producing 30,000 pounds of lettuce and microgreens per week at the moment. We have an outreach program which comprises what we call the associated farmers. These associated farmers form a network throughout the country. They grow according to the specifications as outlined by our institute. They sign a contract. And as a result of that, we are able to control the production, we are able to control varieties, we are able to control the best practices, and we feel that that is a mechanism which is going to help us maintain our competitiveness. And we're building our agriculture around these core components, many of which were mentioned earlier. Youth attractiveness, we give certain preferences to females, the research centered, climate smart, nutrition sensitive, and we impress on our people that we must be globally competitive through the institute with science-based and with technology driven. And we're trying to build our capacity, our manpower capacity on cutting edge technology. We feel in the Bahamas that we have a domestic export market. And one of my criticisms of the region is that we are not exploiting the tourism market in our country. 53 million tourists visit this region annually. In the Bahamas, we have 5 million, and we found that our tourism is a $1 billion industry. 2012 figure is 2.3 billion. But what is ironic about all of that is that 1 billion of that goes out in food. With this new import substitution program that we have, we feel that in 5 years through our new agrivision program, we will be able to generate at least $500 million to save our country money. I said the national food bill is $1 billion. We've identified 32 crops, 4 livestock species, and these are the crops we identified, and you'll see how we intend to develop them along the value chain. 32 of them. In the first 2.5 years, we've identified 16 which we will attack, and then in the next 2.5 years, the other 16. As was mentioned earlier, we are also recognizing the fact that global population has increased, and that the demand for food will increase substantially. And we realize also that that increase in the global population, the middle class will go from 2 billion to 5 billion. And so the demand for food is going to be very, very competitive. We feel that the Bahamas offers a number of advantages. In the rest of the region, their economies, our sister economies, are usually oriented towards the tourism market and the domestic market. In the Bahamas, those markets are fused. Bahamians, our diet has been altered substantially. We've adopted an American diet, and that has created a lot of health issues for us. We have one of these non-communicable diseases. Next to Barbados, probably we would surpass Barbados. Our health care costs are probably the most expensive in the region. Obesity is a factor, and so we recognize these issues, and that is why we're pushing nutrition-sensitive foods. Some of the advantages we have, the Bahamas is the most northern Caribbean state. We have this subtropical Mediterranean type climate. Our proximity to North American markets. We have excellent communication and transportation. We have an international container port. Earlier in the day, we were talking about transportation. We have this container port that is globally competitive. We have a highly financial services sector, outstanding infrastructure, and workforce that is tradable and highly trainable. And then we are open to direct investment, and we seek your cooperation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
We asked Dr. Peterson from the U.S. Virgin Islands to make the next presentation, and then we have one more presentation, and then we'll open for questions.
Looking forward to the interaction. Again, my name is Louis Peterson. I'm with the University of the Virgin Islands Cooperative Extension Service. I have been for most of my career in the outreach unit, extension service, like I said. I've also served as commissioner of our local department of agriculture. I say that to say that I've not worked in our research unit of UVI, but I'm aware of what they do, so I'm going to share some of that with you as best I can. Okay? I'm honored to be here. I'm glad for the invitation. By the way, I didn't know we could bring slides, so invite me next year again, I'll bring some slides. But I'm really happy to be here, and since I've been here, there has been so much information being shared that, wow. We have a very small footprint, relatively speaking, but it's not all about size. We have done some great things. We've exported lots of genetics and technology to elsewhere. I want to share some of that with you. First and foremost is our research work in the area of livestock development breeding. I'm not sure if you heard about a particular breed of cattle called Senepol, but Senepol is a breed of cattle that was developed in St. Clair and it has literally boosted the economy of so many other countries throughout South America, Central America, and beyond. Even before we even heard the terminology of climate change, that particular breed of cattle was developed to really do well, to perform well under conditions of drought, high temperature, and still doing well. So the breeding work continues. There are breeding societies all over the US, Australia, elsewhere on this particular breed. And the breeding work continues. And of course, as we continue to endure the effect of climate change, selection is being based on all of the above to make sure that we keep ahead of what needs to be done in the developmental sector, in research and development. Another area, another breed, I should say, our livestock area research unit, is the white-hair sheep. The white-hair sheep, again, was developed and does well under high temperature tropical conditions, and there are locations, especially in the southern part of the US right now, that has imported that particular sheep and working with the genetics. So we have that contribution to make, and we welcome, of course, collaboration along those areas. I was very pleased to hear about the aquaponic work done at the University of the District of Columbia, because that's another area in which we've been a really, really forward-looking pioneer for many, many years. We've exported technology in aquaponics to many places, and it's to the point where it has gained so much attention that it is now being introduced to the schools, because we find it to be a very, very useful technology approach in light of climate change. As you heard Dr. Ara said, it used, I think, 10% of a conventional. Well, for us, the same is true. And we had a very terrible drought last year. I think Jamaica did, elsewhere in the Caribbean. And the only persons that did not experience that degree of impact were those who engaged in aquaponic and hydroponic production. So we see this as being a very, very useful strategy going forward in light of climate change. So we have work going on, and again, we welcome partners and collaboration in those particular areas. Biotechnology is another area of work that's done at our research station. And tissue culture is one of those sectors in biotechnology. The kind of crops that are being worked on include sweet potato, sorrel, pineapple, papaya. And in sweet potato in particular, a lot of work has already been accomplished in terms of producing disease-free material for production. Sweet potato being a very big crop to us and throughout the Caribbean as well. All of us know about the sorrel crop. A lot of work has been done with that as well. So a lot of research is being done currently on sorrel and papaya, and I think that can benefit our other partners too. There has been, for us, just like in the Bahamas, a real resurgence with respect to agricultural development. We, just like the Bahamas, base everything on tourism and not much else, and we find that that is not sufficient. So there's been a lot of effort over the past, I would say, 5 to 7 years to really reverse that, to the point where a lot of youth activities are taking place. We have revived our FFA program, Future Farmers of America. That program was dormant about 5 years ago, now thriving again. I have been involved in developing 2 summer initiatives because of what's taking place, and they are also doing well. We've developed top partnerships to develop youth summer enrichment programs in agriculture, and those are initiatives that we continue to seek partnerships on. Most of our partnerships have been on the US mainland, Delaware State University, for example. But what I'm saying is that we tend to, and perhaps that's true for many of us, we tend to look to the same partners, and I think there's a lot of room to expand and look beyond our box of partners, so to say, and I look forward to that. For example, with Greece, etc., even perhaps the Bahamas. So we're looking forward to that kind of collaboration. And the second area of work that's really taking place right now has to do with, on one end, youth, on the other end, building capacity among our farmers for organization, for self-help approaches, mostly through the cooperative business model. So that is something that's just getting off the ground, And if anyone is so interested in developing that kind of partnership, we are looking forward. We just recently developed some collaboration with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. We also have developed partnerships in Puerto Rico, which have a very strong cooperative movement. So those are some of the things we are interested in moving forward. And the final thing I guess I'll say before going to discussion is that so much is taking place in the Virgin Islands to revive this industry, that even at the university level, where our program was put on the shelf many years ago, agriculture academic program, the president has now convened a committee to look into redeveloping an academic program in agriculture, and I'm going to serve on that committee. And I guess the point I'm making is that we are not sure what form it's going to take, because we're looking into feasibility and what form it should take. But I'm projecting that it's probably going to take collaborations where students may start at home and end elsewhere. It may or may not be feasible for us to institute a full 4-year program, and we've already begun to look to some universities for partnerships and what they call articulation agreements. We've already begun to look into that area. So again, another interest area of ours that we are looking for partnerships to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Peterson's work is, yes, his comments and input is particularly important given Congresswoman Paskett's remarks this morning. As many of you would not have been there at the session on the hearing, but as you know, Congresswoman Paskett from the U.S. Virgin Islands and has pledged and has committed to working closer with countries in the Caribbean in the development of agriculture, but other aspects as well, but agriculture particularly we are talking about. So it was good, you know, the sort of work that you're doing at the open invitation to collaborate. Now, we just have one final presentation, short presentation by Mr. Bankin Conward. A young person. That is from Edgar Ever.
Hello. As stated before, I'm the computer and media technician for the Caribbean Research Center. And I'll just like to have a quick explanation of some of the things that we do there. At the moment, we're working on a project made with Brooklyn Carnegie Project, which is focused on economic impact, the well-being, education, and gentrification on the immigrant and migrant communities in Brooklyn. Inside of our target districts, which with that project we have a lot of interns coming from not only from DYCD, the Department of Community Development, but right at home inside of Medgar Evers College, where we're engaging the youth, providing them with sustainable economic development and progress within their networking career. We also have a website. This website is still in progress that I'm actually working on. I'm the webmaster for this, where based around the Encounter, which was a forum that we had last year with over 10 different countries. I'm going to show you the affiliates. That's some of the affiliates that we have: Belize, Costa Rica. Some of the affiliates that we're also with are Unipop, ONECA, UNICA, URICAN, and the ECDF. Apologies, this is a very short notice. In regards to this website, some of the services that we're trying to provide, besides sustainable economic development, is agriculture for these countries that we have inside of the forum. That we were trying to get everyone together to bring together what crops they had, certain things that they could offer to each other. Because as we started, we realized that some countries were lacking in some crops, some countries were lacking in certain needs, goods that other countries had excess of. So we wanted to bring them together and have some type of economics talk between them. Some of the other services that we're trying to provide are arts and culture, a place that we can share the arts, the culture of each of the countries, media, whether it be teaching or learning from them what they have to offer, academics, because we're trying to start classes and whatnot to help them provide for themselves. And of course tourism, where we have a lot of nice tourist spots where we are attempting for the Americas, not only North America, but Southern America to trade. Trade consisting of not only the spots, but apologies. Not only all of the spots, all of the nice tourist destinations, but the information that each place has. The biggest thing that we're also working on is news. So we're trying to get all the news from the different countries, what's happening, the floods, the economic impact that is affecting the agriculture. And we're trying to give back and have other countries help each other out. I hope that got my point across in as little time as possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So it's refreshing to see a young person talking in some aspect of work. Okay, so we started with Paul giving us, and he's gone for a moment, giving us a rundown of the work that is being done in Jamaica, working with you, the impact that that program has had, and which seems promising, and of course can obviously be replicated. And so we are at that point, and that was followed. This presentation was followed by Dr. O'Hara, who in a slide presentation did very good work in terms of the urban agriculture. University of Maryland, Eastern Shore, also highlighting the work they're doing, and I'm noting open for partnerships as well. So these are key phrases that we are looking for, an opportunity, because that was the purpose of this session. So, and then, the same was echoed by Dr. Casson of University of Delaware, from University of Virgin Islands. We heard his regional perspective by the executive director of Cardi, and of course, fertile ground, and for that sort of interaction to take place. And so we hope that this creates an opportunity. So I'd like now to, for 10 minutes, that will take us to 5 minutes beyond our time, open the floor to questions. And I know we have representative here from Farm Jamaica, that I'm sure you will have questions, and other representatives that may have questions. I didn't mention Ambassador Inyas. Congratulations on the work you're doing in Bahamas and the transformation. So, yeah, question.
So I hear a lot of good things in the room. Very interested in how we can now transform that into reality. So I know, like this gentleman said, partnership, let's partner, let's make it happen. I like activation. I'm a person that went to Jamaica against all odds, brought down tourists to help us to farm land, volunteers, because I think it's easy to stay here in the States and kind of, or wherever you may be, and kind of say, okay, we want to get this thing done. But the reality has to take place, the action. In taking action, I believe, for me, because I'm originally in real estate, and now I'm in agriculture, and it's taking up so much more of my time. It has to be very measurable. The things we need to have real analytics, real numbers. We need to know how much impact we had on specific areas. You know, did you reduce the importation of foreign food by 10%, by 2%, by 0.5? What is the number at the end of the game? Like, let's just say you're gonna do a specific crop, cucumbers or carrots. You know, you're gonna do that for a year. What is the real meat and potato number at the end of the day? So that we can know if we're having that social impact, if we're having the economic impact. It has to have numbers, so when we are done, we can say, this is what we accomplished. You know, I know growing this sector and not having the data behind it is what I see every day in Jamaica. When I go around, you know, you got guys doing some potatoes over here, some lettuce down there, but nobody has the numbers to say, well, I grew X amount of lettuce, it reduced the importation of lettuce into the country by X amount of %. So Farm Up Jamaica, that's what we kind of pride ourselves on, really having the right numbers, having data logs of how food was produced. We're leaning towards the organic side of food because the demand for organic food supersedes all other demands in agriculture right now. So I'm also imploring some of you guys that are doing your agriculture projects in these countries to look at organic food, because there's a $40 billion market in the United States alone, and it's being fed, 91% of it is being fed by other countries. So it's only about 9% growing here in the United States. So you're looking for a market, it's there. It's gonna take a little more work, it's gonna take a little more technical support, it's gonna take a little more know-how. But at the end of the day, done right, that's the key, done right. You know, it's not about just doing it, it's about doing it right and having the numbers and measurability.
If I may add, I think what we found in our research is that there's not significant, to your point, there's not significant baseline information. Right? And then also, the second point is, we talk about the measurables of the output, but I think what's also very important to measure as well, which we find and which we try to do, is again measuring those preconditions. So those early and intermediate goals. Where are we at on those early intermediate goals, and are we measuring those early and intermediate goals so that we can effectively determine, once we do get to that final point on the timeline, and we haven't met the ultimate long-term goal, we can then go back and see why we did not meet that long-term goal, because we've effectively tracked the intermediate and early stage goals that we set. And I think that's a point that's missed throughout a lot of our value chain development.
Well, and again, to that point, I'm saying that's why it should start with those things in place.
Absolutely.
In other words, don't just start farming. Start by having that record keeping, that machine in place that's going to tell you exactly what it is that you're creating. You know, every month we have to send reports to our office here in New York, and those reports have to reflect exactly what's taking place. It's almost as if you are on the ground farming yourself, because you can see, well, we put in this, it rained, it washed out this, or we lost X amount of a percentage of a crop to beat armyworms, or you know, in other words, it's not just a feel-good statement. It's what actually took place. You know, it's not always going to work out the way that we want it to. We have to know what the problems are in order to create the solution.
If I may speak on that, this is exactly what this website is trying to do. We're trying to get all the input from the different countries and have it on one place, so each country can go and see what the other countries are up to.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Definitely.
Okay. All right. Let's.
Yeah, thank you. I'm interested in Dr. Michael Casson. You spoke about asset mapping for workforce development. And what caught my attention is you said you're doing this in Trinidad.
Yes.
But what I wanted to ask you is, Trinidad is one country which is struggling with the issue of workforce development. They have mass billions and billions of dollars subsidized for people to not work in agriculture, but to take tools and cut grass on the side of the streets and stuff. I mean, can you give us a little insight on how?
Again, we haven't worked with the overall government. We actually done some work with Peptico, the Port of Point Lisas.
Yeah.
And so, again, I can speculate kind of from my interactions with other countries that I worked around, which is, again, and I'm not going to keep going back on over asset backing. However, it's a question of strategic planning, right? And it's a question of, we look at it from a comprehensive economic development strategy. Does Trinidad, does the U.S. for that matter, Kent County, Delaware, do they have a comprehensive economic development strategy in place that is fully informed as to the current assets that region or that locale has? Because if it is fully informed, then the workforce development effort, and if you recall, I said this in my discussion, is that a lot of our efforts are inefficient and not optimal because we're not fully informed as to our current assets, resources, and systems and linkages that are currently in place. And so if we're not fully informed, then our workforce development efforts are not being correctly targeted in those efforts. So I can speak to one company that we're working with. However, as far as its totality, I would imagine that, given the results, I would imagine that some of the same kind of shortfalls and gaps are existing in Trinidad as there are in other countries. So I think that's just key. You have to have a strategic plan in place that is fully informed. And what the young gentleman just mentioned as far as the website, that's what we're doing now. That's what he's attempting to do now, is to provide a platform in which the resources are fully shared so that innovative ideas can come about through workforce development, small business development, and business development. So I hope I answered that.
Ambassador.
Thank you all for a very interesting presentation. Now, I'm a novice, and I like it broken down, meat and potatoes. So I'm going to give a couple of scenarios, two statements, and then I'm going to ask a question or put a hypothetical scenario. I sat down one day and I had a patient. He was from Santo Domingo, and he works in agriculture, and he also does his own gardening. And he said to me, "Doctor, see me sitting here, I could make much more money than agriculture." I had another patient from Ghana, and he says to me one day, he said, "Doc, I grow onions in St. Kitts, biggest onions I've grown anywhere. I take them back to Ghana and I tell them St. Kitts could grow anything, but the people lazy." Now, hypothetical, a 25-year-old, we only stopped planting sugar in 2005. A 25-year-old from the rural area who had a grandmother, mother, father, someone who, in his perception, slaved in the sugar fields. And he has left, he no longer wants to stay, he comes into town. He lives in a little house, and no flat roof, is a gabled roof because of the hurricane, the roofs are gabled, so you can't put anything up there. He may cut grass, or he may go into tourism, he may even plant, do gardening, and keep the hotel, nice gardens, nice grass, everything. But he's not going to go and dirty his hands in agriculture. Now, how do I motivate him, get him to understand that he can make more money than the doctor? Or do I ignore him and go to his 5-year-old child and put the money there? The other thing is I'm concerned about chronic disease, and so I need to start early. Do I just ignore him and go to his 5-year-old child and maybe try to get them rewrite the primary school books? Where do I put my money? What is the best place to start to change things?
Okay. Yeah, I can contribute to that. In terms of what is already happening. That scenario that you're painting is true throughout the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, the Caribbean Examination Council has rewritten the primary school curriculum and have case studies in the primary school system where they are using agriculture as a living laboratory to help teach them about chronic non-communicable diseases, to help teach them about money, to help teach them biology, to help teach them chemistry. They cite a case in Grenada where the little students and so on, grow the food in the school garden, market the food, take some home to the family, some comes into the school feeding program. Okay, so because the fundamental is, in fact, not only at that level, at the level of the private sector too, as we begin to engage the private sector, the basic issue that they say, listen, show me the money. Don't tell me about this fancy or whatever. Show me the money. Show me how I can make money. That has to respect to the little child as well as respect to the investor. To my mind, that's where we have to go. Like I said, the Caribbean Examination Council has started that process.
Okay, so one question here, one response, and then I'll make a comment.
Okay. First of all, I think it takes all. There's a spectrum. I don't want to underscore the value of tourism, which it's like an export. Every tourist spends 50 cents of the dollar on food and beverage. Every tourist appreciates their tourism experience more if they've got something fresh and local that they appreciate. It's an experience to the tourist that pays that farmer back in foreign exchange. So I say tourism is where many places are, and that's good and gracious. I managed an agribusiness investment fund out of Barbados a few years back, and we found one of the businesses that we invested in was growing black pineapple in Antigua to export to Florida. And once they got pineapple, they realized it was easier and more profitable to sell to the hotels of Antigua instead of trying to export and compete to Miami. So I'm simply saying it does take a business plan, but when we got business plans coming at us in the Ag Venture Trust, the turning point for us, all things equal, if they all have a decent business plan, it has to be there. You can't do it without. No one's going to invest in it. But the turning point magic card was, who's the management? Is this an individual? Is this youth committed? Do they have some reasonable experience that gives the investor confidence that they'll succeed? So I think the manager, the individual, the entrepreneur, their drive, their experience, the management team, to an investor, that's really important.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I just wanted to comment on the issue of health. Children. Obviously, today one of the challenges is that most of us will get our food from the supermarket, so children are becoming disconnected from the actual brand food. Now, we've been doing some work on the Eastern Shore with kindergartens, essentially just setting up simple hoop houses and having children getting involved in actual simple gardening and
See how
seeing
plants grow,
the crop grow.
how food comes.
Now, one of the interesting things is the interaction between these children and their parents, because associated with that has been a curriculum where they go through a book that has been modified just to really pass the message across about healthy eating versus disease, and they're able to actually see the whole process. It's really been quite interesting for me visiting that. I'll be happy to share with you the website and you can, go see the kinds of activities that they're doing.
Okay. So, listen, Dr. Benson, just 1 minute, please.
I'll be brief because
one, two, three. Yeah.
I'll be brief because some of what I want to say has been said. Because I mentioned that we started 2 summer initiatives in agriculture for youth, and we've had the same experience as you described. But we find that the perception can be addressed, and one of the ways to do so is to make sure that they understand that agriculture is a science. They have high regard for science, youth do. They regard medicine as a science, engineering as a science, and so we make sure that we express agricultural science to them. But through that approach, as well as showing them the entrepreneurial part of agriculture, let them see how they can really make a profit, and then the technology part of it. Those have made such a big difference. Use their cell phones that they love to use anyway, and create agricultural ads, etc., etc. But the biotechnology, the science of it, the entrepreneurial aspect have made wonders of a difference for us, and I can give many examples as we talk after.
Yes, well, I just want to share a few observations. I am from Guyana, and as I've heard a few of the speakers indicated that the attitude of people in the Caribbean, and I guess outside of the Caribbean as well, but attitude has a lot to do with it. I'm wondering, I mean, we talk about, there are a lot of projects and initiatives that were discussed, but what about an initiative of mass education, public education? Because what has happened is I've seen a few initiatives in Guyana. A few NGOs went into Guyana and they had projects with different groups, and people sold the products, got the money, and that was it. There wasn't any follow-up with these initiatives. I've seen a lot, that has happened a lot of times. So the bottom line is, in my opinion, is there must be some sort of mass education as to the importance of agriculture. And I mean, we discussed about climate change. How does this relate to climate change? Because it's been going on over and over and over again. And
I just wanted to.
That's
Okay. I was just going to tell you, I mean, in Jamaica we have agriculture schools. So our connection to young people is through the agriculture school. So we take the students from the agriculture school. So we already know that they're interested in agriculture. And even if they went there, like, case in point. And to say that there has to be a mindset change. And the mindset change has to happen globally. We have to make farming sexy, bottom line. And if we can make farming, because farming is sexy all over. I mean, you know, you got guys in Wall Street going to Vermont to plant food. I got friends that, you know, left New York City jobs and are doing farming up north. And this whole sustainable and climate smart agriculture techniques, these are things that can be taught to young people, either the 5-year-old person or the 25-year-old person. The 25-year-old person will buy in if everybody else buys in. So that marketing and promotion might be needed as something that is within the region. It probably should come on television, a television commercial that just plays in all of these countries that are in the CARICOM or what have you. So you say, okay, you know, just like you see a television commercial might come on for milk, and how milk is important, or cheese, agriculture is the backbone of our economy, and it kind of moves and says something to the people that are watching it, and it changes the mindset. Case in point, real quick, have a student that every weekend we take students from the agriculture school. But we take different students so that each student can get the experience of organic agriculture. So every weekend, I start to see this one particular girl student. And I said to her, I said, we want to give everybody the opportunity, so you can't come every weekend. I said, you love farming that much? She said, no, it's not really that, Mr. Curtis. She says, I can't go home like all the other students for the weekend. I said, why? She says, because my mother doesn't want me to come home. She doesn't want me to infiltrate my peers, my younger kids, the younger kids in the house. What do you mean infiltrate? Because I'm studying agriculture, I cannot go home for the weekend. They don't want me home. So it's mindset, and that is the problem.
I want to.
I wanted to really build off what you were saying. There was a discussion that took place in Brooklyn, right? At one of the events, what do you call it, social events. And it touched on the way our Caribbean people are issuing media licenses. They just issue media licenses without any check marks or controls. And these media, they don't proportion what segment is educational. They just flush the television with all these programs that messes up the kids' mind.
Yeah.
This is what we need to pull back on.
Okay, I just want to make a point of one comment.
I just want to back up, gentlemen. Here, I just went to Anguilla, and I went to Zimmy Beach, and all of the help there was.
Can you speak up a bit, please?
18, 19-year-old students, and they knew everything as far as the agriculture. They knew the beautiful flowers they had around, the fruits and vegetables that I ate because I am American. It was so different for me and my daughter when we went there. Everything was so nice and fresh. So I would put the money in the school, just to back up what you
Okay.
said.
All right, just one comment in response to your initial theoretical proposition and some of the comments made. I want to look at it from a different perspective. In fact, I'm putting on the table something to consider for the future. Now, ICS recently did a presentation of the Caribbean Week of Agriculture in Cayman Island, and the topic was on the future of agriculture. How do we see, how do we get the diaspora involved in investing in agriculture in the region? What are the prospects? And our presentation was based on creating, that picture for agriculture in the region. And the saying is that to think positively of yourself in the future, you have to place yourself in that future. So we chose year 2030 as a target year. And the question was put out, what will the future of agriculture in 2030, what will it be like? Will it be rosy? Will it be just as we are now, still grappling with basic issues? Or will we be one that is, far advanced, the science-based, technology-driven? We have to start, even now, creating that picture for the young persons so that they can see that in the future, themselves, when they are 25 and 30, see themselves in those positions. So I think there's a basic, we're talking about the training, we're talking about changing mindset. I think unless we start creating that picture of what agriculture will be like in the year 2030 or 2025, we're not going to make any significant progress. So one of the things that ICS will be pursuing in the months ahead is to helping to try to create that picture. What do we want? How do we see agriculture in the year 2030? And then as part of the program, as part of the training, as part of the kindergarten program, you're working with that vision in mind. And of course you set goals, what you want to achieve by 2020, by 2025, to help you achieve those goals. I think this is a basic concept that too many people frown on it initially, because why talk about 2030? We are struggling now. But unless we create that vision and start working towards it, we're really not going to.
Actually, it's a good segue to what I was going to say, and Barton kind of stepped out. But I kind of wanted to have a better sense of what can we really do out of this conversation from a regional perspective. If there are 2 or 3 flashpoints, so let's look at specifics around the big vision. We know going forward that we're going to have a population that looks a certain way. We know going forward we're going to have increasing demand in terms of people want to know where their food comes from, want to have a personal relationship with food. We know people are going to be concerned about, first of all, just having food because of the disasters and new insects, new diseases. So research that we're doing is very critical. We want to see, first of all, is there some opportunity that we're overlooking in terms of a collective research engine, right, that we could actually have the assets. Not this. So let's say all the schools here became part of a cluster, and we know the issues around like soil science because climate change is doing this to the soil, and salt water drainage, and drought research, water research, disaster recovery research, resilience. So there are like 5 or 6 flashpoints that is okay. These are the basic substrate against which everything is going to go, right? So that could be one area where we say the Caribbean should have something like this going forward, and this is something we can move on right now. Because the fact that when I asked, CARICOM did not have a disaster recovery mechanism for agriculture was very frightening to me. I am saying if every time we have a storm or hurricane, it takes 5 to 7 years to come back, and we have not made a definitive effort to engineer a process where, okay, we know a storm is going to hit, the farmer knows they have to do this, the research people know they have to do this, you gather seeds, you gather crop, you gather tissue, whatever. We have to put in place a scientific precision agriculture process. Is there room, Barton, for this in the research that you're doing, yes, for this network of universities to begin that conversation, to put together a proposal that says to CARICOM, to the Caribbean Development Bank, here is a baseline research we need to do in terms of precision agriculture that has to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. Then you have your herb and spice cluster, or your pepper cluster, your ginger cluster, your cocoa cluster, your coffee cluster. You have your fresh vegetables cluster, you have a ruminant cluster, you have your import substitution cluster. You have different clusters around which organizations like the IDB might invest in, because they're looking at the value chain to make sure you're creating jobs for sectors as opposed to a particular farm. So there's a different kind of a partnership. But I do think I want to leave here with a sense that we have a direction that says, everybody's saying SDGs are happening. So the SDGs have goals around food security. We can hang it on that. The SDGs have goals around climate change. We can hang it on that. The SDGs have goals around inequality and jobs and youth employment. We can hang it on that. On gender employment, we can hang it on that. There are different things we can hang a project on to make it attractive to, let's say, a World Bank or IIC or IFC or whatever. And the CDB itself, because I had a conversation with them, and they said, oh yes, we're not interested in this. So the Caribbean really, I think, is at a turning point, but we don't want this ship to take like 20 years to turn. Right. We don't have the time for the 20-year turning process. We need to have an agile steering of the ship with people definitely saying, if we're going to have a society that looks like this, if the Caribbean is going to continue to be a place for tourism to exist despite the challenges of Zika and all these other viruses coming in, we have to also be sure that we're at the forefront of making ourselves known to be the greenest, leanest region ever existing. Because yes, we're small, but you know what? We're agile. And so we turn the language around, even ourselves as people at this level, saying, let's stop saying we're small and we're open, therefore we're poor till we can't manage. Let's say we're small and we're open and we have all the complexity in a very small space, so the agility is there, right? So what our core 3 would say, from your as a regional person, if we have to build a project around this group right here, what might the 2 or 3, let's say, ideas that you can think about, that you're already working on, that you need help with, or things you've thought about but have been afraid to talk about because you might think, oh, he's crazy. Once you create this idea, because that's what's exciting for me, that gotta be crazy. If it's too normal, it's not pushing far enough. It's gonna be crazy. Once you create this idea you have about how we can turn around agriculture, so that 2020, you're seeing a mind shift in the youth process. I sent one last thing. I sent an email, a simple thing, to CARICOM saying we want to launch something called the top 100 people in agribusiness in the region. We want to do that just to get the more PR for them, more branding. No response. So I'm like, okay, well, we can't do by ourselves. We have no money. I mean, what can we do? Small, big, in between, in the next 3 to 5 years that we can start now to create a project around now.
Firstly, coming out of the CARICOM strategic plan, the ministers have kind of prioritized 4 areas. Right? Although a 5th has emerged, like a beacon over the night. Roots and tubers, herbs and spices, fish and small ruminants. Coconuts has come up and has mushroomed. Okay, so there we've actually seen major investments in coconut right through the region. Belize has just broken into the US market with peeled coconuts, peeled You know, you just go off the top and drink fresh coconut water, right? So that has emerged, and we believe that that one actually has the best economic and social opportunities for enfranchisement. So how do we have there's a project currently where CARDI is collaborating with the EU funds with the International Trade Center. We have a set of, within each of the 9 countries, Dominican Republic being one, Suriname, we have this stakeholder platform which includes the private sector and the public sector and the farmers together working towards this thing. How do we move it from there to where it becomes a sustainable industry? Noting the history of the past, where the thing was on coconut oil and the collapse or whatever, the focus now seems to be on coconut water, right? On this new miracle drink. This has attracted Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola has huge investments in this area now, plantings and so on in Brazil, because they realize that this is even better than Coca-Cola. So how does the Caribbean latch onto this thing and create a space for themselves, looking at, of course, different value chains within coconut? Is it virgin coconut oil? Is it wood? You know, is it the fiber or whatever, right? So coconut is it. The other area is the whole area of, well, certainly cassava. We've seen growth in cassava as well too from the perspective. Red Stripe is making an investment in cassava for doing beer. We are seeing in the Southern Caribbean increasingly the largest bakery in Barbados, Purity Bakery, have committed, I think, to put in 40%, substitute 40% of the wheat flour and things with cassava to make a healthier offering. They're doing not with cassava flour, but with cassava mash. So that is emerging. Those two of the areas are emerging. Obviously, that has, in fact, we've kind of run out of time because the president of Ghana is going to engage his colleagues in February next year. We can't put before him concepts. We got to put before him essentially mind what an investment profile is. What if this region invests in this thing, that this will be realized? I've always felt very strongly that the Caribbean should not be importing refined sugar. Now we have sufficient refined sugar. We should not be importing refined sugar. They have sufficient capacity to produce raw sugar. And that model where we did raw material and export it and brought back in refined products, that model is passing. So that's it. And these are all things that are on the commodity side, but they have implications for employment, they have implications for doing the entire value chain. So, okay. Now my next scenario and so on, you really open that field. I remember post 9/11, when the supermarket shelves in Barbados were empty, we had a national consultation on how do we deal with this thing. Suppose it continues, because the ports and things in Miami were closed, right? My recommendation at the time was, let us reinstitute the legislative and policy framework that obtained during the Second World War, where we fed ourselves. The piece of legislation in Barbados, this is the one repeated in 1985, said what you planted, when you planted it, when you harvested it, and it committed that 12.5% of all arable acres had to be in crops in order to feed the nation. We had a cassava factory then that did sweet potato and cassava flour because we couldn't get wheat flour, right? We developed all kinds of recipes for sweet potato and cassava because we couldn't get white potatoes. That was my radical view, and it's a view which I still hold. That if you really want, because quite frankly, world trade hasn't served the Caribbean. World trade has resulted in dismantling of a lot of the suite of services and so on that we're basically providing to assist and so on in agricultural development. we've gotten this sugar and banana, etc. and things have gone through the window. But the only hope until to my mind for sugar nowadays is if you talk about the sugarcane industry where you're producing energy and you're producing other intellectual property and you're producing branded sugar, as the case and where rum has gone. So to my mind, those are the kind of things that we put on the table at this juncture.
Okay. So then, the question can be open to others as well. And let me just, because we have to start to pull everything together. The question is, what do we want to come out of this? The question, and you hear Yolanda, the first sentence in it. What do we want to come out of this? You have the suggestion of given the schools here and the work that you're all doing, some in the US, some in countries in the Caribbean and Africa, given the work that Bahamas is doing, the movement has made, and US Virgin Islands, how can we from this gathering here put together some sort of follow-up action? And I know that for the universities you have to go back to and discuss it, internalize it, and try to move it. But we want to come away from this with some sort of ideas as to how we move forward, so that next year we can show positive results, as you're saying. So let's listen to Yolanda first, and then I'll come back to you.
Okay, I'll be very brief. Basically what I heard today, there are a couple of takeaways I wrote down. And one of them I wrote down was the importance of new production models and creating these partnerships. Can you hear me? I don't want to shout. But
Yeah.
I think it's the air that's making noise. New production models, right, in the region. So we've heard a lot about new technologies that are so hydroponics, which aren't entirely new. But I think they're still kind of maybe in a niche territory, and I think we have around the table a lot of research organizations who are piloting these new technologies, not only hydroponics and aquaponics, but others. And I think there's the opportunity to prove them commercially viable and to try and take them to scale, so that farmers and companies in the value chain can actually start to use them, and we can have a system and a sector that's climate resilient. Because with aquaponics, it's very water efficient, it's very resistant to drought, to hurricanes, to storms, and things like that. So I think what we need to do is start to identify some of these new and emerging technologies. I work at the IDB. I am in a part of the IDB that loves innovative, cool, out there ideas. And so we're always looking for these things that we can finance. And if we can get some of those to come up out of this conference, and we can get some concrete proposals where, we have this great technology that can work with sweet potato farmers or with cocoa farmers or whatever, increase their yields, make them more resilient to climate change, and link them to markets, however, that's something that we'd be willing to invest in. So from my perspective, that's what I want to hear. And if there are ideas here, we should start writing them down.
First of all, countries have to decide what is their objective. The global objective is food security, food and nutrition security, right? And how do you achieve that? That's the objective. Because come 2050, when this population reaches, I won't be here, you'll be here, right? Will you be able to afford food?
There's a lot of objectives. Food and security,
Right.
nutrition, economic growth.
The other thing is, in our
job
country,
creation.
we are moving toward import substitution. And that requires certain innovations in our production system. We have a big country. We have a country that has subtropical and tropical climate. We found that the climate change is real. For example, in the northern Bahamas, last year we had unseasonable rains for 2 successive years. We wiped out our onion crop. So now we have to look at new technologies for the southern Bahamas, where you have less climatic influences during the winter months, in order to ensure that we have certain commodities throughout the year. So it's based on how countries view their meeting their food demands, Yes.
Okay,
I'm hearing again this idea of technology innovation. We have this is a research partnership thing. Can we not have? Because when I was at the bank, I started talking about science research, science park research. Can we not have a project which is itself a project around research and science? In other words, if precision agriculture will be necessary for us to be able to continue to revamp and revitalize ourselves, the first thing is, what are the assets for research that we have at our disposal? in a cluster of universities, in a cluster of countries, right? And how do we then take one or two crops that we know, one might be an import submission crop, one might be an export crop. I think herbs and spices and coconut are two exciting ones because they grow across the whole region. So then you have the ability to test, and test also this issue about the fact that every time project is done, it goes well, and at the end of the project, it dies. So we also have to test and run different kind of participatory research, which builds in the longevity. You go ahead.
Well, I think what's going to really dictate how well we do is how sustainable is the project.
Exactly.
Because anyone can grow onions for one season, but what happens to the next season? All right, because I can tell you right now that there is strategic ways to grow food where even if you don't rotate that crop and you put the crop back in, it will germinate again and you have crops again. But it takes building up of soil, not degrading the soil. So you know, again, soil is the life of a plant.
I don't know that necessarily that.
What's that?
The technology is the issue.
No, wait a minute.
With soil and the crops and stuff and so on.
No,
I think quite frankly from our experiences in the Caribbean, that the issue actually is much bigger than agriculture. The issue of the farmer staying in business and that there's an opportunity for the technology and things to be adjusted based upon changes and things in climate goes back even deeper to where you're talking about what is the national agricultural policy? Have we gotten it right? Okay? What is the trade policy that supports agriculture?
Yeah, but
what is the tourism policy that supports agriculture? Remember, I mean, sitting with the Minister of Commerce, we were discussing the issues of chronic non-communicable diseases, and he said, look, he was the Minister of Commerce, but he used to be the Minister Don Benitez from Barbados. He said, listen man, let me tell you something. The reality of the matter is that the fellows in trade is who support my campaign.
That's a bigger problem.
Okay.
No.
How do we come up, like you say, with new models, not models of production, models of where you're integrating production, marketing, and trade to make this thing sustainable? That, to my mind, what we need to do.
No.
Do we have basically a 2030 food security scenario, set of scenarios for the region? Do we even have that?
No, we don't.
All right. So that could be a first demand of ourselves. Because if we have another 9/11, if we have more wars and rumors of wars, how will the Caribbean feed itself? So maybe the first thing we have to do as Cardi is say, look, Cardi wants to create a 2030 food security conversation. It's going to be participatory. It's going to have all the stakeholders, and we're going to come up with scenarios that are very easily understood by policymakers. To say it in a very practical way. Because we write it very academically, they won't get it. Scenarios that can be sold politically as well. So because if this happens, then this. Because agriculture is a systems of systems problem.
Okay.
For engineer, right? I'm an IE. So I'm saying it's a water system, it's a political system, it's a trade system, it's a soil system, it's a system of system problem. So can we have that as one of the potential, say, we want to have out of this between CARICOM and the CDB a 2030 scenario exercise that will not be done by consultants writing it for you, but that will be done by a process of stakeholder workshop where the people write it themselves.
Right, Sean.
Then it's owned, and you have the cross-functional age group, the cross-functional stakeholders in the space writing the document, or at least crafting the ideas that go into the document. Not a consultant going and talking to you. Because when it happens that way, you don't get the cross-functional of ideas necessary and ownership for it to take root. And I say this because in 2012, ICS got University of Maryland Eastern Shore and 4 universities to go down to Jamaica to have a conversation on the sea, Caribbean Sea, the economic sea. And there was a big argument blew up in the meeting when the Minister of Agriculture accused UWI, saying, I have never been invited to UWI to talk about what the fishermen need. It took someone coming from overseas for you to invite me here. So my point is, it's a different kind of conversation where it's a different stakeholders who don't normally sit in the same room or in the same room because it's a system of systems problem.
Well, I want to just, I want to interject one thing.
What about this conversation? I own construction firm. And I go to the Prime Minister, I say I employ 1,000 people. All right? And I can get chicken cheaper from someplace else, right? Rather than going home, right? If I don't get that chicken, I can lay off half of these people. What is the Prime Minister going to say?
It's going to bend.
To what?
It's going to bend.
All right, that's the reality.
Exactly. Yeah. I understand that.
That's the reality.
Okay.
That's the case.
Okay, so that's.
I want to get back.
Paul is going to leave us.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
I just want to get back to farming real quick.
Hold on, let's
No proposal.
Huh? I want to return to farming real quick. So what I'm saying is, if you gave $1 billion US right now and took it and put it down in agriculture, let's say in Jamaica, that money would last a year. They would farm for maybe 2 years, and then there would be no more farming, and the very remnants of it left, because it's not sustainable. Let's come back to the sustainable model, because that's where it has to begin. Remember, it starts from the ground up. All these guys with the policies and this and that, fine and dandy. But if we are not growing the food correctly, which I'm telling you, I'm on the ground, and people are, I'll give you just a prime example.
So this is why the 2030 vision model is important.
It's very important.
Because you're working towards that. And it means benchmarking yourself every 5 years, every 3 years.
Let me tell you, the practices that are being used are antiquated and do not function.
So just now, Dennis, so we agree with that. Everybody here, not disputing that. The question is, what can we do in this group as a first step towards addressing that?
So I know, I'm just going to close. And so why we took the agriculture and the organic agriculture business model and agriculture practices is because it keeps the food sustainable. It's not that you made one big crop and then you can't go back and get the next crop the next year.
I think the answer is clear. Cardi is already talking, they know what to do. The Bahamas government next to him is already having a plan, they know what to do. It's just a matter of bringing the people around the table. Now let me drive a point, Claire. 2 years ago, CARICOM came to our meeting. Claire, 2 years ago, CARICOM came to our meeting, and they really was confident that this cassava flour and this cassava products is going to hit the market. 2 years now I've been waiting for these products to show up in the store in New York. I cannot find it. Where is it?
Where is it?
Where's the implementation part of all the good things we're doing and talking? That is the one of the root cause problems that we.
Well, at least we know the cassava product is in the store in Trinidad. It's in the stores in Barbados.
Can't get it in
America. We're
millions of diaspora living.
Yeah. So that's an issue. But I will say this to you, however. The agriculture that we've had in the region, which have lasted 200-300 years, have been predicated upon policy and a legal framework. Okay? And to my mind, there's scope for the Caribbean countries, either collectively or individually, to have, quote unquote, a farm bill. Similar to what obtains here, similar to what is in India. That is part of the policy and legal framework, right? Where you move the thing out of administrative discretion to where this is how we are going to operate this business. All right, and therefore that would then provide you with the protection that you need and things from to respect and things to the support from tourism and from trade, etc., to give agriculture the space and to operate.
I agree.
And to do a farm bill, what would it take for us to get the politicians to sign off on that? ministers. This is what I'm saying.
Right.
I think it would have to be regional,
Right.
not necessarily a one country.
Right.
It
So
would
I'm
have to
saying
be a regional bill, and it would have to work like a partner
What we're
drug.
asking for them is the content. First of all, would the universities at the table, in principle, we don't have to go back and think about it, but in principle, would the university at the table be open to round robin, let's say email consultation around some sort of let's call it from the US side in a way, a cluster of universities that are doing work in the region. That's the first thing. So you can say, okay, we agree to go to foreign agricultural service and get political support for a grant, and that might be best led by the University of Finance, for example, because they can have the justification, right? Especially if it ties to climate smart agriculture. Okay. So that's one thing. Secondly, can we agree that we want to say something, and out of this conversation, we agree that there needs to be some sort of a CARICOM regional agriculture, what's the process or policy? Agriculture conversation tied to the sustainable development goals, which all the region is moving towards now.
They're all signed on to it.
Exactly. That will give us some legs to start to work on, right? Building on the 4 or 5 things that are already in place, they don't think we're starting over. We just want to put it into a system of system approach that says, but you say this, but on the one hand you're doing this with energy, on the one hand you're doing trade, etc. So can we agree that there should be some sort of support that we can possibly ask the Caribbean Development Bank for? Reason being, they have a policy that says they will set aside funding for Caribbean consultants to do certain things. So that will kind of justify you using a particular strategy and getting capacity in the region itself to do that. So is that a second thing you can ask for?
Yes, certainly. Because the Caribbean Development Bank, I met with them last week, and because they're about to make some big investments in infrastructure in Jamaica, in Guyana, and they're saying, okay, look, our scenario says that the best way to justify these investments is for agricultural value chains to be developed to pay back for these infrastructural investments that they're contemplating.
And the third thing is, as we wrap up this session and to the youth session, which is very important, we're going to take a break and go to the youth session and come back. We got a very important and very subtle message from my young lady to the right. Now, 4 years ago when I started coming to the island, they said, I want to have a conversation on agriculture. They almost rolled me out of the back. Oh, you don't want agriculture. Nobody wants agriculture. They don't want agriculture. So I'm very happy to see you here. You have no idea. I'm like, yes, I want. Okay. Now, they are really looking for innovative projects. So can we find a way, the Ignite Caribbean process, which we've been trying to do is to get the young people involved. Can we really make a stronger effort to the next 6 months? Again, it could be a round robin way, could be an online platform way, to get your young people in the region to put out some innovative ideas. We have an internal judging collectively. We come up and we tie to what we know we have to do, and out of that might come an idea we can feel comfortable saying, going to the bank and saying, here are 4 or 5 things that would tie into either the agri-tech issue or the farmer marketing issue or the soil issue or the policy issue, but something. Is that something we can agree? As the third thing we ought to be thinking about, having an innovation strategy process. In other words, if we just wait for it to happen, it's not going to happen. We have to be deliberate and intentional about looking for innovation and getting young people to feel that they're either taking us up. Is that the third thing we can say we're going to put in place, an innovation? In other words, can I get you all to buy into Ignite Caribbean, Farm the Future, that's my slogan, Farm the Future, as a way forward for us to get innovation ideas ready to give to the bank in the near future, because their cycle is by March, April, they want to have something to be talking about.
Okay. I would say yes, and immediately I can make reference to the fact that we have started a working group within CARDI to look at building this bridge between renewable energy and agriculture. Coming out of the experiences of Germany, where the farmers are making more money from the renewable energy than from the pork. It keeps the farmers on the farm, it makes the farmers more competitive, more globally competitive. Can we look at that and look at the opportunities therein for the agricultural sector in the Caribbean?
Okay, so given the three things I will put out, the three ideas I will put out. First of all, CARDI 2030 food security plan. That's a discussion that we can have, that we continue a dialogue with CARDI, but of course expand it in time. But then the second one, the Farm Bill, and looking at the institutions around here, how can we start that conversation to help, to develop the idea in terms of, and seeking support to develop. And it will involve institutions going back, thinking about it, but we need to keep the dialogue going. We cannot lose the momentum, and so we want to have a consensus and, going forward, and leaving here, we need the
youth innovation that you just.
We come to youth innovation. That's the third one. Yeah. But this is the second one. I think we want to capture the moment and the opportunity given the universities around here. And so we're not asking for any commitment now, but we are just asking for principles to go back and think about it, and of course to talk more about it to see what we can accomplish. Is this something we can agree to? Yeah, okay.
Oscar, I will capture all these on the notes, in the conference notes.
Yeah.
And we will put it in a piece of paper. We will send to CARDI and all the stakeholders.
Yes.
And we will get something going definitely.
Yes. Yeah. And so
committee.
Another one.
All right. And then we will okay. Between Dennis and myself, we will start that process to continue the dialogue, and then we'll take it from there. And we'll get Bahamas involved, CARDI, every institution involved, UMass involved as well. I think it's vitally important that we do that, and so that is one of the things we're going away from in this meeting. And so within another 2 weeks, you're going to hear from us. And then finally, the youth innovation strategy process, another very good one. How are we going to elaborate on that?
Well, I mean, again, right now, as we finish our break, we're going to have a conversation just on that issue, on how we get young voices. We have a couple young people in the room. Young man spoke probably before he was supposed to speak, but at least he's still here, so we can sort of have him come back and talk about his perspective about young people getting involved in agriculture, urban agriculture in New York. I was there in Brooklyn, it was maybe like 2 weeks ago, and we're talking about how the Caribbean Americans in Brooklyn could be part of the greening of Brooklyn movement, and this was just urban gardening and food co-ops and food deserts in Brooklyn came up. So he might be able to speak on that. We have an ambassador here who is going to bring a few words at this open session and put in place. But what help us to kind of figure out how to get the conversation started. And we have Verena from YABT will talk about what they're doing with the youth. We really want to amplify this conversation, and that will help us from defining what this innovation strategy might look like.
I see a challenge students and I.
Exactly.
That's where their reactions.
Exactly. Right.
Clerical Forum, we did put forth some ideas, some project ideas, and so those are just examples, but we can build on that. So it's already 6 o'clock, and we'd like to bring this session to a close. I'd like to thank everyone here for their contribution, in particular the speakers, the University of Delaware, University of Virgin Islands, Ramsey, CARDI, and of course UDC is left already, and Paul. So thank you very much. We will continue this conversation, and we will keep everybody involved if you have your time. So, you feel your on if you want, right? Because we're going to have the Ignite Caribbean session. We have to people.
So how much quick stretch and then we'll continue?
Yes.
5 minutes.
Finally,
Where am I?
I will spend 3 months in the one song and one night.
They want to sell food to the hotel. They'll buy it if it can be successful. You eat it today, then it's not going the same way the next year. There's a problem, and the council said they just go crazy and they blast it with all this stuff.
Yes,
What happened to the hotel?
Yeah, they can't.
So that's why they're doing $1 billion tomorrow. They still wouldn't be able to do this right. Pleasure.
Oh,
okay.
We're just coming to see a few rules and run.
Good. Sweet then. Out of the greenhouse. Maybe about 2 inches, inch and a half.
Hey, doctor, how are you? Okay. Good.
We want to, let me tell you what we did. We brought down students from the Northeastern University, out of Boston. And we brought the students and we let them come into an area and interact with a whole community.
Gentlemen, we have some snacks on that side. We have some snacks and soft drinks on that side. Please help yourself and let's get started.
No, everybody wants to fun.
We have some snacks and soft drinks on that side, and let's come and sit down. We want to be out of here by 6. What time is it? 6, right? By 7, because I have a long day tomorrow, so let's go.
Okay.
We have an hour.
Yeah.
Here it is.
And there's sandwiches as well. There's sandwiches as well. So
Changes the whole community. When we bring the students from abroad and we do like a what they call it, foreign exchange.
Those days you were selling as well.
I'm out of cards. But my number, everything.
Did you get your name?
It changes the mindset because now they see these American kids. Digging soil, having fun, laughing, and they're happy to be there. The kids will come up. I had a guy run over, go home and get his certificate. Look, man, I can farm too. I've got my certificate in agriculture. The bottom line is, they just want to see that this thing is not for the worst. And that's, I like fundamentals. That's why you might hear me talk like it might sound simple.
Open source.
Explicit, you can pay for sexual
So we have to integrate that.
And money management. Because what I spoke to carrots. 1 acre of carrots. 50,000.
Okay, Oscar. Oscar.
Okay, I'm sorry I cut you off. I didn't mean to understand to get back before you.
That's okay.
Because I'm going to be that's right. Dehydrated.
So
that's collection only.
Yeah.
That's just collection.
We may even have the technology available for the context of trying whatever it is. Anyway,
I love what you say.
Yeah, we're talking. We're talking. You know this.
Yes, that was
You know? Nobody knows the community more. Ask them to, if you don't tell them Coca-Cola can't taste, well, we will take piece of the profit, we will help the community. Okay, thanks. Good stuff.
Ambassador, and for you joining. Welcome. We have with us this afternoon Ambassador of Trinidad and Tobago that has joined us, of his wife and sister. So welcome to this evening's session. Yeah, we have Lorena. Yes, okay. Oh, young, YBT, yeah, YBT. And so what we'll do, we'll ask Ambassador to make a presentation, and then we will go into the...
That's probably too big a word, a few remarks.
A few remarks.
I don't think you want to talk to the presentation.
Okay, yeah, so, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Mr. Spencer. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I am particularly encouraged when I note the portion from Dr. Nelson that I shouldn't make a presentation, which I came prepared to do. And that I should perhaps more just convey some remarks that are suited to the purpose for which this roundtable is convened. So let me not, however, miss the importance of expressing my appreciation to Dr. Nelson, who has labored, you all know, very assiduously for a long time on matters of this type, trying to promote our interests in the Caribbean region. So once again, Dr. Nelson for the invitation. And I know there have been two co-chairs of what is referred to as Ignite Caribbean, Samora Christine. Is that Samora there? Okay. Who's Samora Christine and Tracy James?
That was last year.
That was last year. We try to get some information, so we look forward to whoever is collaborating now. And essentially what I gather is that this roundtable has been convened really to fire the interest, imagination and ideas of our youth in the region, so that we could transform the agricultural sector in the Caribbean into a source of new and exciting opportunities for business. Put simply, that's what I understand the intent to be. And I think there's no question that this roundtable and this discussion is timely, because we know that the issue of youth in agriculture needs to be addressed, and not in the good old traditional way. We really need to come up with a new model, a new paradigm, and some more innovative outlook on that. I think the fact that we're having this discussion as well in the broader context of the recent adoption of the 2030 Sustainable Development, the Agenda for Sustainable Development is also important, because sure we all know that once you're talking about the future, you have to talk about youth. You know, I usually say I like to give my time to people who have more time than me. And that's because they will certainly see things that I will not see. And so today, I think that future outlook gives us real hope for engaging and addressing issues of world hunger, food security, and improved nutrition. I don't have to tell anyone here that the FAO, everybody is concerned about the involvement of youth in agriculture. And in the Caribbean region particularly, there are a few challenges that we can't avoid and run from anymore. Our farming population is aging. There is some youth disenchantment with agriculture. And so what we need to do now is find new opportunities and something that's transformative. We don't want a transactional engagement. They must see as though what they engage in is going to bring some food. At this point, let me just make a quick inject. I was here for the end of the last session, and I was listening to the discussion about the bill and policy and so on. It was interesting. Last night, while following some program on television, the mayor of Compton in California was making the point that if you want to change outcomes, you have to change policy. And when you're talking about a bill, you're talking about policy. In the region, we've generally focused a lot at the very programmatic level. The programs plugged into the same policy framework produce no different outcome. And so I'm happy and encouraged by the discussions that I was hearing earlier, that we really need to create a different platform. There is a whole paradigm change that you must design to fire the interest and involvement and imagination of young people. So CARICOM and the CARICOM heads have begun to apply their minds to this, so that in the declaration of Paramaribo and the future youth in the Caribbean community, we know that the heads themselves made the statement. They expressed their resolve to generate entrepreneurial development among our youth from the earliest stages through education and mentorship, and fostering a private and public sector partnerships that create an environment for business development and growth. And then, just this year in June 2016 in Trinidad and Tobago, our Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, the Honorable Clarence Lambert, Senator the Honorable Clarence Lambert, he hosted the 9th Regional Planners Forum on Agriculture. And what was clear, and the Minister said it himself, is that there's an imperative of introducing innovative programs. Please remember that you only get innovative programs with new outcomes in a transformative context and environment if we really change the policy framework on which we proceed. I think that's a fundamental requirement, and so I look forward and encourage this forum to continue to do that. The government of Trinidad and Tobago has made it clear in its policy statements that it intends to promote agriculture entrepreneurship, particularly among rural youth, as a key element of socio-economic development in rural communities. And so there have been a few programs that have been introduced. Yes, we have the traditional 4-H program, which I don't tell anybody about, I'm sure. But we also have something called agricultural incentive program, which encourages young persons to enter the agricultural sector by providing them with an incentive of 50% of the startup cost of farmers up to a maximum of 38,000. Then we have to leverage ICT once we're talking to youth. I say I am techno-migrant, but young people are techno-present. They were born into the environment. Some of those people like me have to learn how to get into that space. Young people in that space. So you can't be trying to get them involved in agriculture without leveraging ICTs. And so what we have done is that we have introduced an ICT-driven platform known as National Agriculture and Marketing and Information System of Trinidad and Tobago. And the system provides real-time access to critical information as needed by the key players in the agribusiness sector, and it allows them to make more effective and relevant routine management decisions. And finally, we have a program that's being introduced in 2017 called the Young Entrepreneurs in Ornamental Horticulture in Rural Communities. So again, you have to find context and try and find ways to fire the imagination of the young people. We think that all of these initiatives in Trinidad and Tobago, we feel that this is a way to encourage and come alongside and support young people who want to make the noble walk towards contributing to food security. And I listen as well to the importance of making sure we mobilize the resources and the financial environment. All of those things, and I'm sorry for going back to it, need to be plugged into a new redesigned policy framework. Your bill must be speaking to those things. Yeah, policy framework that establishes the institutional arrangements and so on. Skipping through some of the presentation. As we go along today, we'll allow our conversations and reflections and the promising future of what we must see. We must see it as an imminent Caribbean agricultural transformation process to be inspired and influenced by a quote. He's a British statesman, Benjamin Disraeli. It's a very simple quote. Almost everything that is great has been done by you. Almost everything that is great has been done by you. I'll conclude my remarks here, and I look forward to hearing again how the discussion continues after I have to leave. We have another engagement that started 23 minutes ago, but they knew I was coming late. I wanted to keep my commitment here. I want to commend and congratulate everybody for engaging with this issue. This is an important issue. This is about our future. This is about our food security, dealing with our hunger issue. You know, you walk about the streets and you see people who can't feed themselves. You don't know why. What's the real issue? But young people, I assure you, have imaginations that will provide solutions to all of these challenges. I think that's what we're trying to do, to ignite their imagination, fire their passion, and get some success in the region. Yeah. Thanks again for your attention and time. I wish you all.
Thank you very much. I wanted to tell you that the youth you spoke out was there last year.
It wasn't here.
Somebody spoke about
No, that wasn't him. It was a representative of him.
Oh, okay.
One of his guys.
Oh,
It's the other team.
The team, yeah.
Okay. It's growing.
Okay.
It's growing. Yeah, he can't be everywhere anymore now. Okay, so.
Sponsored to Barbados.
Oh, okay.
Participate in the
Right.
Barbados Harvey Fest.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, before you leave, Mr. Ambassador, Rama Tramsomer, someone of the table and pineapple farmers. The conversation continues, and just before you came, the conversation centered on the challenges that the Caribbean has with respect to the overall food challenges, food security, etc. And the question really is, and the conversation really continues with respect to one, how many of us around this table are willing to let our children educate them in agriculture and not to become a doctor, a lawyer, or some other professional? That is one. Two, in the Caribbean, check all the budgets, allocation from Jamaica, Guyana, transportation. It is
What's the threshold you're looking forward to seeing our agriculture budget grow? I have one. My PhD degree in economics, I did agriculture economics. So I pay attention a little bit, not too much. Time to cross the $1 billion.
And this is society at the University of West Indies held a forum, COPE. And I did a simple presentation on agriculture, diversification, etc. And I said bluntly, what signal do you send for agriculture diversification